Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to get started. People might join, but just because of the time limit we have, I want to make sure I cover all the content. So, firstly, thank you for coming to my first webinar on nutritional guidelines and how to use the nutrition guide to do that. So, in terms of what I'm looking to cover today, is a little bit about what the nutrition guide is and some of the details around it. I'm then going to go into how to use it for beginners, and then I'm going to take you through the first three stages of how I use the nutritional guide, which is completing the journal, guideline assessment and setting, and then continuous tracking thereafter. So one thing I did send in the email to you was a downloadable handout, and it's just like a timeline, and you might want to make a few notes on that, on how I use the nutrition guide and the key times that you might want to use it. In terms of what the nutrition guide is, again, I created the nutrition guide about over a year ago. It was designed to help provide the coaching tools that people need to help support their clients. So it's not necessarily there with all the answers, because each person has their individual nutritional beliefs, but it's designed to help you to work with your clients on achieving their goals. Now, who I actually created it for was mainly for beginners and intermediates. So advanced level coaching on nutrition, we would use a separate process for this. So we're focusing mainly on beginners who are individuals that have a large amount of weight to lose, maybe, who are maybe new to weight loss or fitness, so have never achieved anything like this before, or kind of someone that has a very poor nutritional history and has a lot to actually coach on to actually get them to their goal. It's also for intermediates. Now, an intermediate is someone that might have a goal not as large as a beginner, so they might only want to lose a stone. They're doing quite a few things right with their nutrition, but still not quite there. And you might need to go into some of the details of their nutrition to actually get the results. Now, why would you use the nutrition guide? You don't have to. It's not for everyone. The reason I wanted to create it because I wanted to give everybody a system they can use. Now, I'm a big believer in systems, mainly for the reason that a system is an easy way to coach clients. It's an easy way to improve and personal develop your own services, because you can build onto something. And if you haven't got a system in place, I find it very hard to actually track clients' nutritional progression. I find it very hard to actually provide an intervention. Again, the advice and the details can be very individualistic, but a system is just a process that you can take a client through to get them closer towards their goals. Now, in terms of when would you use the nutrition guide and the systems that go along with it. So I actually use the nutrition guide right from the start. So I would give this client the guide at the point of consultation for them to go away and have a read some of the information. After that, I'll then start walking them through the stage purposes from maybe the taster session, if there's enough time between the two, or if there's a little bit longer between the not enough time between the consultation and the taster session, it might be the first session. And then I'll start on a week-by-week process to work through the guide and the particular system that we're going to use. Now, how to use it. Each page in the guide is a different system to use. So the first is a bit of information at the start, which then proceeds onto the guidelines, which we're going to cover today. It then progresses into food lists, which is more of an intermediate, and recipe modifications as another one. And then you would most probably move away from the guide with advanced protocols if you need to use for certain clients. Now, today I'm only going to focus on the first three stages for beginners, and that is centered around the nutritional guidelines. Now, the nutritional guidelines, they're a set of the ones I've created are 8 nutritional advices that you can give to your client for them to follow. They're designed to support positive nutritional change in their lives. Now, with the whole process of nutritional guidelines, they're mainly centered around what the kind of initial steps that you actually only need to take with the client to get the result. So what I mean by that is often when we're coaching with clients, we do think of this big outcome goal, the large outcome goal. So the client that wants to lose a stone, the client that wants to lose 2 stone. But sometimes trainers can be as guilty as clients of forgetting about are the smaller steps, the milestones that will make up that goal. So if you've got someone that wants to lose 14 pounds, the first milestone for them is actually to only lose a half a pound. And then what you need to then think about is what's the nutritional advice that you only need to give to your client to help them to lose that first half a pound. And then you want to continually progress and build up those guidelines and those supporting factors to take them through each milestone to get to the outcome goal. So what the benefit of that is if you go too hard and too quick and provide too much information, try to change too much of an individual's diet, you can get kind of the negative actions that come from people that when they kind of like fall off the wagon or kind of have that week where they don't actually manage to actually meet everything you set out for them. So if you try and set too much, that can happen. The other aspect is that you're at risk of forcing a plateau. So again, even with all our knowledge, we can actually create plateaus in clients by just providing too much change and the body adapting to it, and then they're hitting a plateau, and you've used all your wonderful resources to actually get them to that plateau a lot quicker than it needs to be. Well, rather what we should be doing is providing step-by-step nutritional guidelines to actually get them on the path to weight loss, and just keeping them there and keeping them progressing, and actually putting in the next intervention when's needed, rather than trying to keep on doing it. So in terms of the guidelines themselves, so I'm kind of walk through the 8 guidelines in the guide itself, and I'm going to just explain a little bit about each one and why you would use it. So the first one we've got there is consume 6+ portions of vegetables per day. Now, again, I'm actually a big believer on going as high as you can with your vegetable intake, especially with the nutrient-dense variety. So not talking, this is more of your non-starchy vegetables. The main reason why is we know that getting plenty of vegetables in the diet, especially nutrient-dense ones, provides vitamins and minerals that help support the body's natural functions. It also provides a good quality source of fibre that's better than something that's calorie dense and doesn't have much return once we consume it. Now, for a lot of individuals who are actually struggling to eat any vegetables when we're trying to coach them, this can seem like a massive adaptation to go from eating no vegetables whatsoever all the way up to try and consume 6+ portions a day. Now, the guidelines are designed to be graduated interventions. So these are kind of like more the end product of where you want someone to go. So if you've got someone at the start that's only consuming nothing, you wouldn't necessarily then get them to change to 6. You might only want to, in a week by week, increase their intake by only 2 portions of vegetables, because that is a big enough progression in their nutritional lifestyles for the better. So again, the guidelines we're talking about here are more of the end result where we want to work them to, and we might need to take a step-by-step approach. And other individuals might be able to make the bigger steps, and that's okay. And it's on a case-by-case client scenario that you're going to be going through this with them. Now, the other thing is moving on to the second guideline, which is to consume 3 portions of protein every day. Now, I've gone for a very non-scientific method with this, because I find if people are consuming protein regularly, they are actually getting more than they actually need to. We know that protein is very beneficial in terms it's an essential nutrient in the body. It's made of our cells, it's involved in enzymes and hormones, and also it's actually good for promoting satiety in individuals. The third action is to drink anywhere to 3 to 4 500 millilitres bottles or cups of water per day. Again, this needs to be a bit more of a range, because again, this has got a little bit of case by case. So it does depend on the individual. So if you've got different body sizes, might require more water. Again, an individual that is doing a high level of training might also require more water. So again, I'm just basing it on setting around 3 to 4. Most people, that's enough, but you might need to modify that depending on your client. Again, why we want to increase water intake in individuals is basically it does support weight loss. Again, it helps with people's satiety. Again, it helps with natural body processes in terms of clearing out waste, providing energy with the body, and actually involved in the body itself with being a constituent of things like blood and involved in joints. The fourth guideline that we're going to go to is eating breakfast. Now, this is quite a controversial subject, because again, if you're going to ask someone like me and my mum, we're not breakfast people. We never have been, and we do well by it. So when I planned my mum's nutrition for her to help her lose weight, we didn't actually implement a breakfast. But for some individuals, if they can't control their eating intake, which me and my mum can do, they might need a breakfast. It does help individuals to help create a regular eating pattern, because it helps modulate some of the hormones in the body, especially things like insulin. So again, eating breakfast, again, case by case, but it's mainly a point there to highlight to actually create structure in an individual's eating plan. Someone with an erratic eating structure tends to actually not support weight loss. So that's why that point is in there. The fifth one is to avoid processed foods. We know if we get an individual eating a more raw food diet, we provide more vitamins, more minerals, the amount of calories they consume per nutrient is higher. So we know it's definitely beneficial for the individual. But one thing I do try and avoid, again, why I call them guidelines, is to avoid the strictness of rules in there, because, again, you can enter into a lot of conflict with the client in that case. So having the guidelines to avoid processed foods is more focused on if you've got an individual that highlights in the assessment that eating a lot of processed food, you can work with them to actually reduce it. And that's just the highlighting the need for that guideline. Guideline 6 is to consume healthy fats. We know, again, fat's just as beneficial as protein in the body. It's one of the essential nutrients. Again, it has a very big link to health nowadays, especially in the link with inflammation. Again, we know the extra nutrients and vitamins that are key that come with it, and we just want to make sure that our client is eating a nice, great, healthy source of that. The seventh guideline is to be aware of your sugar content. Now, again, we know that high sugar diets are normally one of the causes for people to put on weight. We're not looking at just things like fizzy drinks and crisps. We're looking at also carbohydrate sources like bread and pasta that when broken down, will break down into sugar and have the same effect on the body. So we want to highlight to individuals, if they are consuming a very high sugar diet, that we can work with them to reduce that down. The last one is kind of tied into it, and that's to monitor fruit intake. Some individuals, if their insulin pathways are that disrupted, a high fruit diet can be just as damaging, even though it does come with a lot of nutrients in there. Again, this is something I had to support my mum on, who didn't eat much vegetables but could eat fruit by the plenty, and by helping her to monitor and control her fruit intake, and maybe just even from selecting the source from very kind of high sugar foods like bananas and going to something like berries, which have a high antioxidant and nutrient profile, can be a more of a beneficial switch and helpful. So there are the 8 guidelines I would use. If I get those 8 guidelines into people's daily eating habits, I know it will support weight loss and help them. You don't have to use them yourself. You can modify them. But one thing I do stress with a guideline is it needs to be as clear cut as that. So again, if there's any form of ambiguity, it just opens up for questioning and up for the client to actually try and cheat the system. So if you're a little bit more stricter in terms of a clear outcome of the guideline, then you can help support them. Okay, moving on to the actual 3 stages I use. So how I actually use those guidelines to actually coach and implement into people's eating is 3 stages. Now, the first stage is completing a journal. Now, I will do this with all my clients. I will get them to start the journal either at the end of the consultation or at the end of the taster session, and get them to record it for 7 days. I still see a major benefit in journaling, whether it's a beginner, intermediate, or advanced client. It just allows you to actually predict habits, helps you to understand their nutritional limitations, it understands what the client likes to eat, and actually provide tailored advice. So again, the positives really outweigh the negatives. So again, a lot of people will say that food diaries, people often lie on them, they don't put every information on there. And I actually don't think that is down to the diary itself. I just think it's down to the trainer and the coach's belief in the system. So often we need to actually make sure that we clearly set out what we want and what we expect. And I think the other issue is as well that the client has to spend a lot of time actually completing the journal. They can spend an hour and a week trying to complete it. And then often what happens is we only spend a couple of minutes looking at it saying, yeah, that looks all right. Where if we actually put more investment into actually using the information and demonstrating this, then the client is more likely to complete it because they see benefit from it. And that's what I see now when I actually use the guidelines and spend 15 minutes, sometimes even spend a whole session actually going through the information on there to provide the support. Now, I do go for more of a simpler tactic now. In the past, I used to have a really complex diary. I find, especially with guidelines, you only need simple information. So you actually only need to know what food and drink they're eating, how much they are eating. So we want a rough portion size. Again, you can use whatever you want, whether it's the fist portion size method or like the palm size, cups, tablespoons. If you want to go as far as weighing, you can, but just a way to track how much they're eating. And then the last thing is times. Now, if you've got a client that is maybe a little bit advanced, has a few health issues, you might actually want to go a bit further and work out things like hunger scores, mood scores, energy scores, ailments, so get them to record how they're feeling after each meal. You might want to go into that, but for the guidelines, it's not really something that's as necessary. What we're really trying to find out is kind of what and to what level people are eating. So I'll get them to do that for 7 days. Once they've got the full 7 days, I then will go through stage 2, which is guideline assessment and setting. So I'd actually do this as a checklist. So I would have the 8 guidelines on the side, and I would go through their day and see how often they're actually implementing these guidelines. Now, I'm looking between 80 to 100% as successful implementation. So what I mean by that is if they are doing it in 80% of the time in the week, I'm happy to say that they are following that guideline. It will differ, and you have rationals for this. So for the protein, I would prefer someone to follow that 100% of the time. But something like processed food, especially at the start, if they're doing it 80% of the time, I think that's a positive step in their lifestyle. So again, it's a nice range, and you will maybe differ that from each guideline. But what you would do is you would sit down with the guidelines with their food diary and just tick or cross whether they're following that guideline. Once you've done that, you then want to select the guideline that has the biggest effect, the simplest change with the biggest result. So again, it's up to you. There's no ranking system on there because it's down to the individual where you see the largest effects might be made. So for someone that's eating no vegetables in the day, I'd say that could be a massive impact by increasing their vegetables up to 6 and see how their nutrition will change when you support them. In terms of how you'll do this, I'll use a specific system. I call it the SMARTS nutritional advice. Again, so each of those letters just stands for it. So again, everyone knows the SMART. It's the same thing as goal setting. So it stands for specific. Again, making sure the guideline is specific to their need. Measurable. We need a way to actually assess this. Achievable. Again, this is something that we need to agree with the clients and make sure that they will more than likely achieve the guideline if we set it. Realistic, again, this goes back to making someone go from no portions of vegetables all the way up to 6 in one go. It might need to be a bit more graduated. And the T stands for time-based, so making sure that any guideline you set has a period of time that you can work with them over to make sure that it's implemented. Where we have used the word SMART, and it's something very individualistic to me, is that the S stands for solution. A lot of the times we say what we want our clients to do, but we don't give them the support on how to do it. So the solution is the answer to the problem. So I'm going to use an example now. I'm going to use the water one. So if I want someone that's having no water in the day other than coffees and teas, I might set the goal to increase your daily water intake by 500 millilitres. Now, that is specific to them. It's measurable in terms of how much water they're drinking. It's definitely achievable because it's something it's a small step in terms of realistic, and it's something they could work at. Time-based, what I would add into that is I would look to them to do that over the next 2 weeks. So again, to implement that over that time and track them. And the solution is on the end. So I'd recommend to them that by buying a water bottle, that will help increase their water intake at work and at home if they're constantly filling that up. It could be something else. It could be asking them to have a glass of water the first thing they wake up in the morning. But what you're doing is you're providing a solution to go along with the guideline. You can have multiple solutions for each guideline. It doesn't need to be a one-to-one. It's just as long as whenever we provide advice, we provide some form of system to help implement that with them. Now, in terms of then we looked for them to implement it anywhere from 7 to 14 days until it's fully implemented. So we want to make sure there's a kind of a repetition in their actions and making sure they're actually doing it. Again, once it's fully integrated, we would then look to introduce another guideline, and we would look on a single guideline by guideline focus with clients as you go with it. In terms of once they have done this, you then move into stage 3, which is continuous tracking. So the only way we know if this guideline is going to be put in is if we get them to continue to track thereafter. Again, you're not looking for detail. Again, it can be just as basic as the journal you've already completed. Something you might want to do, and again, in the handout I'm going to send out after this, is have a separate column just to track the guideline you're implementing. So you'll have the daily intake down one column and a second column under the day. That's designed just to track maybe the water intake and to put information in there as they write. And it's just an easy way to get the individual to reinforce the guideline you're setting and the ways for you to track it and make sure they're doing it. How often do you track and look at the information? I would actually look at it on a session-by-session basis, but I mostly wouldn't do any form of formal new integration of another intervention until a full 7 days has passed, and spend a little bit of time going through that. But I would, if you're seeing a client multiple sessions in the week, keep checking each session just to make sure that you might need to provide an additional solution for them to follow it through. And then what you would want to do is work through each guideline over the weeks until they can fully integrate all 8 guidelines into their lifestyle. And then you might want to progress them into some of the advanced tactics. But again, each week, as you're maybe progressing through each one, you're looking to still see progression and results, and you're helping support them. Again, this is definitely designed for the beginner that will struggle sometimes if you give them all the answers at once and looking for a nice step-by-step approach to achieve the weight loss they want. So that is my webinar on nutritional guidelines. What I want to take the time now to do with you guys is to answer any questions you've got on this. So if you open up your chat, if you want to type in a question there, and I'll happily answer that for you. I'm going to just, while they come in, I've thought of my own questions as well. So one of them might be kind of a timeline of this. So how would this actually look if you're implementing this with your clients? So what you're looking to do is at the consultation, you would give out the guide, get them to complete the journal for the next 7 days, look to assess that journal either at the taster session or first session. Then you'd look to, at that session, also implement their first intervention, and then on a weekly basis track it. Again, if they can implement a smaller change in 7 days, then that's fine. So then implement the next one thereafter. And again, it could take on, depending on how long and how good the client is, you're looking at anywhere from, you could mostly achieve full integration in 4 weeks if they're doing a lot of them already, or it could take 2 to 3 months if you've got some that's nutrition is that poor and they have that much weight to lose. So it can be something that is a graduate process, but you are looking for the smallest possible change to get the biggest possible results. And someone that's nutritionally that poor, this will be enough for them. Another question I thought of was, what if the client is actually following all the guidelines already? So if you sit down with them and you do the assessment and they're actually ticking most of the boxes, then I'd mostly say this client is an intermediate client and will need you to go in more detail and look at some of the additional systems that I use. So I will take the time in other webinars to coach on some of the other tactics that you can use with your clients that if you need to provide a little bit of extra detail. The other thing is, again, onto that is, how do you assess if a client is a beginner or an intermediate? Would still be go to this process, because no matter what you do, whether that is a client that's working as a beginner or an intermediate, I still do stage 1 and get them to do a journal, and it gives me the ability to assess whether they are a beginner or an intermediate or an advanced client on the back of that. I've got a question from Jay. In terms of if they want to train first thing in the morning, but they're not a breakfast person. So this is quite an interesting thing. Training in a fasted state could be okay for the individual, but what you might find is that the level of intensity of your training might need to be a little bit less at the start to get them into it. So it might mean that we know that if you provide nutritional support to someone, that you can guarantee to get the weight loss, and that training is not the key, it's a multiplier. So you might want to adopt maybe a way to improve secondary factors, to mobilize them, to improve flexibility, spend a bit more time on improving strength, and just taking a bit more of a graduated approach till it can adapt to training in a fasted state. If an individual in the case needs to eat, again, and you're struggling to sort of coach that, is you're looking for something that's easily digestible, something like fruit, or maybe even something like a pre-workout shake can also be beneficial as well, because it's something that can easily assimilate in the body and provide energy. Again, you might even want to look to making sure the type of there might have some form of supplementation to take during training as well to support. So you've got a couple of methods to either adapt the training to help them learn to train in a faster state, or you want to provide something that's easily digestible and used for an individual for training in the morning. Again, what you want to make sure to do is that the post-nutrition is very supportive in any case anyway, because that's a window you want to take advantage of. So hopefully that helps, Jay. And helps you guys. Any more questions for me? I've got one more question of my own, is what if the client doesn't follow the guidelines? It can happen. You get an individual that you can provide all the support in the world, but compliance is low. And this might require a bit more support, as in going in, taking the time out and going into the detail of how to implement the nutritional guideline in to a higher level. There might be an individual that might require a different system altogether. They might not get on with guidelines. They might want to be told exactly what to have and when. So you might want to take them, even though they're a beginner guide, straight into an advanced phase in terms of applying meal plans, or even cope using things like food lists and like that to help coach an individual in a different way. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is provide the right support for the individual to get the result. And it doesn't make a difference in what way that support comes. It's just we want to make sure we're using all necessary systems to our fullest. And the beginner system that I've just gone through today is designed to do that. Any more questions? Okay. That's it. Well, hopefully you enjoy the webinar, guys. And again, I'm going to do another webinar in a couple of months' time, and I'm going to take you through the intermediate tactics of food lists and possibly recipe modifications. I kind of don't want to overload you with information, so when I go through design, that I'll pick the one that's right for you, information for you. Again, if you want me to cover a particular topic, guys, please let me know. I know I've got a meal planning one coming as well that I'm going to do as an advanced tactic webinar. But again, if you've got any other topic you want me to do a webinar about, please just email me, let me know, and I'll happily go away and prepare something for you guys, because again, I want to make sure the support's tailored to you. Also, there will be a handout and a chance to, again, we're going to hopefully load these videos up so you can do a bit of a playback. So if you want to go over the information again, gives you a chance. And again, I'll send out a webinar in a handout in, and definitely in that handout will be the journal system to help you track nutritional guidelines as well. Okay. Well, thank you for your time today. Thanks for coming, and see you soon, guys.